guys in the dark.
To intern 23, I have accidentally deleted your message, but here is part of it. It does state, and this is the full thing, I don't always listen to a trailer park dweller with a GED education, but when I do, I brace myself. Well, yes, I do have a GED. I do also have some technical school under my belt. But also, I don't see you with 25,000 subscribers, or any for that matter, in making any money on YouTube. If you think you can do better than me, then why don't you get $3,000 worth of equipment like I did, including the computer, the microphone, the soundboard, and all the programs that I paid for in cash, with my own money. And why don't you try to show me up then? But I highly doubt you're going to even do that. So why don't you sit back, shut up, and if you don't like my stories, or my channel, you can go somewhere else. Have a nice day. The withdrawal had started slowly. I felt off. The hair on my leg stood on end. Then the feeling of needles grazing the flesh of my arm announced itself to my brain. It began pumping through my arteries. My blood had ran cold. It felt like a foreign invader, as its iciness insisted, if I didn't come up with a solution fast, that there would be hell to pay. My stomach lurched. Junk sickness seized me. My body was in revolt and demanded a call to arms. My flesh was under duress, and I was one phone call away from the solution. I went to the payphone, my only option after pawning the iPhone my parents had bought me. I picked it up and dialed Big Fate, as if possessed. I knew this was a bad idea. A really terrible one. My actions were no longer my own. I begged, and I pleaded for him to stop through, but he had refused. He said what I feared that he would. He insisted in no uncertain terms that I come to his house. I had only been there once before, and I had made a deal with my soul that I would never return under any circumstances. However, this being my only option to get a fix, I hopped into my shitty car, headed over, doing my best not to get pulled over for speeding on the way there. Of course, I wasn't always an addict. Heroin was my fix. I was a very promising scholar in high school. I had straight A's until my junior year. However, I fell into a proverbial wrong crowd. What started as smoking weed once or twice turned into parties with people who all had unsavory connections. A line of coke here and there, and I was still in the clear. It was the night that someone laid out a line of smack that was the beginning of the end for me. I snorted it, thinking that it was blow. The euphoric feeling that accompanied the drip down my throat was unparalleled. That's when I started my affair with H, the love of my life. While my world and ambitions burned to ashes around me, there was one constant. The release from life that the drug provided brought a variable cremation of all my cares. I pulled into Big Fate's neighborhood, barely able to hold onto the wheel with my shaking hands. I'll be calling this part Skid-Row. It was being way too generous. This isn't what you would call the place where dreams went to die. It was a mausoleum of the hopes and ambitions of the destitute. Dilapidated duplexes and derelict apartment buildings lined the streets. Children played in the avenues with the blessed innocence of youth, not aware that in the game of life they had drawn the short straw. I walked up the wooden stairs as they threatened to give way from my weight. I pulled the screen door that barely remained on its hinges and knocked on the door. It flew open. Big Fate stood right in front of me. He opened the door, a sinister smile on his face as he had invited me in. The thing about Big Fate that most people remarked about when meeting him was, naturally, his short stature. He was about 5'1" at best, but size isn't everything, you know. It revealed in the fact that his frame was definitely ruthless. As the teardrop tattoos under his eyes indicated, he was not someone to be trifled with. I entered the home, and the smell hit me immediately. The aroma of cat urine. This was strategic. I was convinced that he did not clean up after his animal, on the off chance that someone would dare to ask about the stench, and give him a reason to seek retribution for it. Rumor had it that the only person ever mentioned the smell, and they were never seen again. My voice had broken the silence. You got it? Yo, I got your shit. Come in. Sit down for a second. We have much to discuss, he had said with a sly grin. I had no choice but to go in, sit on the ramshackle couch that was in his living room, and stay put with anxiety coursing through my veins. I looked at the coffee table, and relief momentarily found me. The answer to my prayers was just 2 feet in front of my face. He picked up the bag, handed it to me before I could even grasp it. He quickly snatched it right out of my hands. That's pleasure, motherfucker. First, we talk some business. He looked at the stress on my face and reveled in his deceit. So, do you have my money? Listen, man, I get paid Tuesday. I lied to him. If you can give me that bag, I'll pay you double. He had asked me if I looked like a charity. All pretense went out the window. He had swiped all the dishes in my direction right off the table. Stood over me in a threatening way. How much money do you owe me? I really didn't respond, knowing that there was nothing that I could say to appease him. I want you to say it. How much do you owe me? $1,000, I replied. $1,000. And you expect me to front you even more? Are you out of your mind? I wanted to cry at this point. I wanted to flee, but I had held out hope that if I weathered the storm, I could leave with H in my hand. Please, I begged him. Just this one last time, and I'll give you $2,000 when I get paid. You can trust me. That's one thing I know that I can't do, he said. Me and you are different. I'm beyond trustworthy. If you screw with me, you can trust that I'm not going to take that shit lying down. Then he called in D-Murder. I turned around to see the large form approach. It was Big Fate's right-hand man. He had advanced towards me rapidly, brandishing a baseball bat. Show our friend here about trust, he had said with a laugh in his voice. Before I could put up my hands to defend my face, the bat had made contact with my head. Blackness had followed. I woke up in his grimy basement, the concrete rough and cold on my legs as they lay on the floor. The throbbing pain in my head was dulled by the increasing symptoms of withdrawal. As my consciousness had slowly come back, I realized that the crack on my skull and the junk sickness were the least of my worries. My hands were elevated above my head. Attached were a pair of handcuffs. They were tethered to the wooden railing of the basement stairs. I looked up to see Big Fate next to D-Murder, standing ominously by a small table. When I saw what was on the table, my pulse had quickened. My already stressed heart threatened to burst out of my chest. On the table was a 9mm handgun. However, that isn't what worried me the most. The needle-nosed pliers next to the gun were worn down from use and covered in blood. He broke the silence with a shit-eating smile on his face. Now I take no pleasure in doing this to you, he lied. But if I don't make an example out of you, every junkie in this town will think that I've gone soft. He told Murder to grab me by the legs. D-Murder had sprung to life, grabbed my legs. Big Fate removed my shoes and my socks. I could feel the cold steel of the pliers graze the flesh of my big toe. How much do you think a junkie's toenail is worth, he asked. I'd say about $100. Would you look at that? 10 toenails, $1,000, he said gleefully. If you scream, I put a bullet in your head. The pliers clamped around my toenail. I began to struggle ferociously, but to no avail. Please, I beg. Please what? Stop? Just let me shoot up if you're going to do this. Unbelievable. He increased the pressure of the pliers and began slowly removing the nail from the flesh of my toe. The pain was excruciating. It had made a slight ripping sound as it had come free. I wanted to scream, but I knew if I did, he would make good on his threat. Fate held the pliers by my face and showed me my detached toenail. He looked at me with disgust for what I had said, reflecting exactly how I had felt. It was at that moment that I decided if I made it out of this alive, I would go and get clean. You have some balls, you know that? I think I'll take them. He pulled down my pants and my boxers. Everything had shrunk back in horror as they were exposed to the cold, still air of the basement. No, I'll do anything, I said pathetically. My words did nothing. I struggled with fury and vigor that I didn't even know existed inside of me. Big Fate had scraped the skin of my scrotum with the pliers. As it began to clamp down, a crashing sound had filled the air. The stairway railing broke from its home, With an incredible momentum, the handcuffs came down on D. Murder's enormous head. He fell to the ground unconscious. The shock at what happened caused Fate to become momentarily petrified. I kicked him in the face and scrambled for the gun at the table. In one movement, I had picked it up and pointed at Big Fate's smug mouth. Do it. Just fucking shoot me then. My index finger had gripped the trigger and pulled. Click. There's no bullets in it, you dumb motherfucker, he had said with a triumphant chuckle. His victory was short-lived. I grabbed the pistol by the slide and brought it down to his mouth. Teeth flew out. Blood was erupted. The force of the blow was so hard that it knocked the gun right out of my hand. In a panic, I had pulled up my pants, grabbed the handcuff keys, ran to the stairs, and then went to the front door, made my exit out to the street. I struggled to put my key in the ignition as the front door to Big Fate's house flew open. Pistol in hand, he had loaded the magazine. I turned the key knowing that it would stall. This car was on its last leg. I cursed myself for trading in my 2009 Honda that my parents had bought me for this piece of shit that I now have. Miraculously, it had sprung to life. The sound of the gunfire had filled the air. The back window of my car had shattered. I stepped on the gas as I peeled out. As I did, I could hear him shout, "You're dead, motherfucker! You hear me? Dead!" I drove as fast as my beater would allow. When I was absolutely certain that I was not being followed, I had found a payphone, put an anonymous call into the police. My various warrants for petty theft had barred me from reporting anything without a shroud of anonymity. I had driven with my destination in mind. I pulled up to the driveway. I went to the doorbell ferociously. My parents had long stripped me of my keys to their house. My mom had answered the door. "How much money do you need this time?" I had collapsed on their front porch. I woke in my childhood bed. My parents had stood over me, looking sullen, but very hopeful. My father had spoke. "While we had laid in your bed with you, you said you were getting clean. You said it like you meant it. Do you mean it?" Tears had swelled up in my eyes. I had answered honestly. My mother had bent down, went and kissed me on the forehead. Sleep found me once again. I had awoke with a fever. I was hopeful that the worst of the withdrawal was behind me. I couldn't have been more wrong, though. It was back with a vengeance. I called out to my empty room, and I had received no answers. I suddenly awoke again with a start. I swore that I heard slamming of the front door, and it brought me reeling out of my slumber. They do say that you can hallucinate when you're coming off of junk. I pray that this happens to be the case. I looked out the window, and I see that it's still daytime. There's no cars outside. My clock reads 1 p.m. With my parents at work, I'm wondering why I heard the front door open so noisily. And since my parents happen to be gone, I start to wonder why I hear footsteps, and why do I hear them coming down the hallway to my bedroom. Suddenly, my door opens up. It's my father, standing there, looking directly at me. He had told me that he decided to park in the garage, and he came to check up on me, so he left to work early. I told him everything was fine, and that yes, I truly am getting clean. I explained to him everything that happened to me. I could see the stress in his eyes, but he was happy that I am still alive. Later on that day, my father was watching the news, and saw that both Big Fate and D. Murder were arrested on countless charges. Their house was raided by the cops, and they were thrown in jail. After that, I went to meetings, and I made sure that I got clean. After that, I made sure that I would never touch that stuff ever again, or any drug for that matter. I'm just happy that I'm still alive, even after everything that has happened to me.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.